No problem.
Hello, Mr. Mogobe.
Hello, Lorato. How are you this morning?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you? Good morning.
Fantastic.
Erra.
It's a wonderful morning. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you once again for doing this. We appreciate your time in waking up early to do this. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege that you invited me along.
Erra. Mr. Mogobe, just to give our viewers of a bit of a background of what you do, who's Mr. Mogobe, so that they know why we are here and who are you. Could you please just give them a bit of a background?
Okay.
Erra.
The full name is Lerumo Mogobe. I'm so direct crude translation, I'm a boy from Duganela ward.
Okay.
And I am involved in business here in Gaborone and across the country.
Erra.
My background is law. I have training as a lawyer, and I happen to have also a master's degree in law. But I gravitated towards entrepreneurship over the years, and I run an outfit called Mogobe Incorporated, Pty Ltd, which has got subsidiary companies which are operating in the real estate space, also in the hospitality space, as in lodges, and we also operate restaurants, and then we're involved also in sanitation. So I'd like to think of myself as a serial entrepreneur who is running different businesses which are anchored around real estate in its many forms.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mogobe. That is a really, really good profile, actually. Very interesting. So just to tell our viewers a bit of what we're going to do today, we're going to be talking about property and how this pandemic and what's happening in the world is going to affect the property market. We're just going to pick Mr. Mogobe's brain a bit on what has happened in the past and what he's just going to predict what might happen this time and the advice that he has for the property investors. All right, Mr. Mogobe, let's start right away. So what happens normally during this time to property values during a time like this? I'm sure you've experienced a recession before in your lifetime and you've seen what would happen to property. Yeah. What do you think might happen to property? What do you think is going to happen to property values?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball that I would spin around and it would tell me what exactly is going to happen. But based on previous occurrences, my view about this particular event, the corona situation or the COVID-19 situation, is that it's more of a black swan event than it is a usual type of recession. It may have created conditions that are similar to those that existed during the Great Depression, but a lot of the severity of it, depending on whether it becomes just a recession, which is comparable to 08, 09, or whether it becomes a real depression comparable to the late 20s and early 30s, will depend on how prolonged it is and how long it is. As I'm talking to you, the president gave a speech to the effect that we start opening up on the 8th gradually, but it's unclear whether we'll actually be opening or the new developments in terms of new infections or new risks of further spread.
Dependent on that.
Yeah, it's unclear whether if this happens, the government will go back and extend the lockdown as it has done in South Africa and maybe one or two other places. But and now I'm hoping, I'm an eternal optimist, so I'm hoping that it will start opening up.
Yeah.
And after all, the what we're hearing from experts internationally, including doctors, is that the situation is not as severe as we originally thought. Certainly the projections that were given by the CDC, by people in the White House and so on and so forth are not bearing out on the ground. That's a good news that has emerged the last few days.
Yeah.
So based on that, I'd like to believe that we will be able to get back to normalcy. But still, the economy has received, if you like, boxing analogies, it has received the right hook and an uppercut.
Yeah.
And it's currently on the floor. It's been knocked down completely. So we do not know whether it's knocked down for the count or whether it will get up. So as an optimist, I hope that the economy beats the count and then gets up, gets back to normalcy. In which case, it might take something like 6 months for things to stabilize. So that's what I'm hoping. So the model I've been working on around my head in terms of with my team is a situation where we open up gradually during the course of May, and then we recover fully over 6 months. But as I said, it's up to the creator, it's up to forces which are beyond our control. And if that model doesn't occur, then we might be heading towards more from a recession situation to a depression situation. I'm praying and hoping against that.
Yeah, I'm also praying against that as well, because Botswana will be very badly hit if we do experience that era. So what do you predict on the value? Do you think the values are gonna drop of the property values?
It's difficult to say. Certainly
at this point, yeah.
But Botswana seems to be a bit of an insulated market on the property side. For instance, thinking back to 08 and 09, the impact on the prices was not as severe in Botswana as it was internationally, as it was perhaps in South Africa.
Yeah.
So I think the market in Botswana, based on our experience, Mogobe Incorporated, is a lot more stable. And there's no indication even now, 4 weeks into the lockdown, that the property prices have been affected in any significant way. So there's a kind of lag. I don't know how to put it. There's a kind of lag in terms of us feeling the effect. You know, if I think you had one of your guests explaining the dynamics of the international market, but it appears that there's some kind of lag. You know, when our diamonds are not being bought and things like that, the lag and the effect comes comes to Botswana a bit late. It's like we feel the after effects after a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that there's a direct effect. It's more in terms of the national economy as a whole and national consciousness as a whole, not limited to real estate. And I've done a post on Facebook, I don't know whether you saw it, where I talked about, after talking about how, you know, we survive during the lockdown and how we thrive, I also talk about how Africa needs to change, how we need to...
I saw it on LinkedIn. Very interesting, by the way. Yeah, you have different... Yes, very interesting.
So I'm more... Yeah, so my interest is to me is on the bigger economy, on the bigger mindset stuff.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating what's happening there.
Yeah.
So in terms of, just to answer your question, sorry that I've been a bit convoluted, but to answer your question, I do not think that if this thing is just a blip where we recover over 6 months, property prices will significantly be affected. But if it extends and extends and extends, I think that's when we may have significant reductions, because I don't think our market was inflated. I don't think our prices were out of whack, so to speak.
All right. No, that's fine. Thank you for that, Mr. Mogobe. Now, but what do you think, what would you advise property investors at a time like this?
You see, I happen to be a buy and hold investor. What does that mean? What I mean is that, they say in real estate that they are not creating any more land. And land is because with property, Ghana, you have three possibilities for growth. One is appreciation, right? After appreciation, it's you get rentals, which increase every year by sometimes it's 8%, sometimes it's 10%, depends on your lease. And then of course you have the appreciation, and then you have other benefits such as tax and so on and so forth. So our approach at Mogobe Incorporated is that we are a buy and hold investors. So I would say to property investors, unless somebody has a gun to your head, metaphorically speaking, in terms of you really experiencing a squeeze, it's better to try and hold. If it's possible to hold on to your property, and if you're really pressed in terms of cash, consider something like equity release or borrowing against that property rather than selling the property would by and large, to me, be a last resort. Although having said that, we do have an acquisition division in our company where we are growing in three areas. One is acquisition, the other is development. And the other is to consolidate what we have. So we'll continue to consolidate. At the moment, we're it's more or less like we're walking on eggshells, so to speak, in the sense that we're trying to be very, very careful before making any significant or large acquisitions. But I think if your cash position is strong and you have an opportunity, you have a willing buyer, a highly motivated, a willing seller, I meant to say, a highly motivated yourself. Obviously, being in the property field and being involved with acquisitions, I would encourage my team to go for it, to acquire such a property. But I would not generally advise someone who's not under pressure to part with any property.
Okay. Speaking of rentals, Mr. Mogobe, right now, I know we have people who have lost their income because, small businesses are definitely not coping with this, so therefore the ripple effect is that employees then don't necessarily get paid the same salaries that they were normally getting, or they're not getting paid at all. So therefore now it affects them as tenants, therefore then affects the landlord. What do you advise how this can be handled between landlord and tenant?
You see, if the tenant does not pay, it obviously has a domino effect. The landlord will not be able to pay his employees,
as well,
maintain the buildings properly, or pay the mortgage. So it has a ripple effect if tenants don't pay. So what I would advise both landlord, and we've been doing this with our tenants, landlord and tenants, to wait until the situation stabilizes and then enter into discussions as to how this can be done. Because I was talking to my bankers, and the bankers were telling me that, Mr. Mogobe, even if we give you a bank holiday or a payment holiday, even if we give you a moratorium, we're still going to come back to you for that payment.
We want our money. It's not like
we want our money. So the banks are saying, you can decide. We can maybe give you some breathing space in terms of maybe you're not paying capital or interest, or a combination of both, but sooner or later we want you to pay. So similarly, especially with residential tenants, it is difficult for them to make the argument that we can't pay when they are physically in lockdown, in occupation of your property. With residential tenants, perhaps with commercial tenants, they can try and argue the force majeure argument. The force majeure
There's no
argument that it
business.
was an it was an act of God. It was an act of
nature.
State. They might make that argument, but a lot will depend on the individual leases, how they are interpreted, and even COVID-19, whether COVID-19 can be described completely as an act of God or as an act of state. So I don't want to preempt the negotiation between the landlord and the tenant. Neither do I want to disclose needlessly the sort of negotiations we're having with our tenants. But the point is that some form of negotiation is going to be required, either in terms of rescheduling payments or giving each other some breathing space. But it seems to me, as long as the lease is valid, some arrangement has to be devised where account has to be made for this period while lockdown is taking. Maybe some sort of compromise, 50-50, 75-25,
something.
Any number of possibilities. But negotiations have to be entered into in good faith when things subside, because right now the sand is still shifting. Things are still moving. We don't know. Things have not stabilized for us to know how things are going to unfold. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'm just saying that both sides have to tread with caution. And speaking as a landlord, I don't want to disclose all my
your secrets,
all my arguments on both sides. Yes.
Your secrets But you would just on that. I think what we just need to make clear as well, for as much as also the banks are also saying, yes, we can give you a payment holiday, but we still will want our money back. It's the same thing with the tenant-landlord relationship. Yes, if the landlord is in a position to give you the break, it does not mean you're not going to pay for those months. You might defer the rental for those 3 months, but you still have to pay. You're owing those 3 months until you are able to find the money for those 3 months. But it doesn't mean they're giving you free accommodation or free rental for that particular time that you needed the break. I think that's the part that we need to really note down, that whatever negotiations that happen, the tenant shouldn't take it as if it's a free time for them.
Because the lease agreement is still intact. It has not been cancelled. The keys have not been handed over. And you have not initiated the termination process. There are some tenants who terminated prior to the lockdown. Those are looked at differently. But if the lease is still intact and the obligations are still there, and you haven't followed the procedure set out in the lease, it would be unreasonable for you to expect to walk off scot-free. Perhaps it's a matter of now tenants or landlords going through the likes of Business Botswana to see whether they can go as a block to go to government to seek some sort of assistance. Those are possibilities that can be looked at a later stage. Some negotiation can happen at a higher level, at the level of, it used to be called BOKIM, now it's called Business Botswana. So all those things can be looked at, but at this point, as you say, it's difficult to totally be thinking of writing of rents, and tenants should not anticipate or think in terms of rent being completely written off.
That's the thing. And the engagement as well, in terms of the communication, because for instance, I'll give an example with myself. I was also just asking this, that who initiates the conversation? Is it the landlord or is it the tenant's role, really? Or is it both? Either. It can be either.
I think it's both. It's both. I think there are two sides to the agreement. Both parties can communicate with each other. But I foresee a situation where at some point the landlord picks up the phone and say, tenant so-and-so, but you have not paid this month. What are your reasons? And then the reasons will will come out. But I think as an act of good faith, the tenants should be proactive. You know, as an act of good faith, they should be proactive and start the engagement themselves, initiate the engagement. That's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, because what I did, I had to contact my tenant myself. How are you doing? Has your income been affected? How can I help? You know, let's have the conversation. You know, if the tenant does not say anything, it's okay for the landlord to also engage. How are you doing? How can we help? What's happening? Is your income now? You know, another one, Mr. Mogobe, that I would like us to stress on is for tenants not to take advantage of this. If you can afford it, you know, if your income has not been affected, don't take advantage of this time and say, you know, I can't afford to pay rent when you know you can afford to pay rent. You know, as well as because
I agree with that.
yeah, you know,
I agree with that because remember that the landlords also have obligations. They have commitments. They have school fees to pay. They have mortgages. They have all kinds of things. And for capitalism to work, you know, money has to circulate. So I think it's a totally valid point. People should not hide behind COVID-19 and start defaulting on their obligations. I'm also looking at it from this point of view. If you are really an astute business person, you ought to have made arrangements for a situation like this. And in the case of most tenants and landlords, there will be the issue of security deposit, which the landlord is in possession of. So this is the right time to say, okay, I'm going to consider applying my security deposit towards this rent on condition that you replace it over time. So there are all sorts of permutations. I will take your security deposit for April, for instance, and apply it towards rent, but I need a commitment from you. We need to write and draw up an addendum to the lease so that you can arrange how you're going to replace that security deposit. That's one way of approaching it. Yeah, but there are many other ways, but you need that engagement and that discussion, and it differs from one landlord to another.
Absolutely. So would you advise maybe during a time like this as well, let's say maybe tenants are really struggling to pay rental, and they're probably opting to now terminate the lease agreement, even business tenants, you know, not necessarily residential but also on the business side as well. Would it be possibly also to give landlords an idea to, you know, think about maybe also reducing the rental rather than remain vacant with I mean in the long run, not necessarily immediately. So probably think about that and see ways of probably reducing the rental just to retain.
A prudent and business-minded landlord will anyway continually be looking at the landscape, continually be communicating with estate agents to know what's happening to rentals in the market. You know, we have to have our fingers on the pulse to know what is happening and what's. So I do not want to preempt that conversation, but I think, yes, the landlords may need to consider all those things. I've had big tenants after maybe I've had one tenant as recently as January, after being with us for 7 years, coming to us that the 7 years have come to an end. You can see things are changing, the dynamics have changed. You want us still there. And then you consider as a landlord that this person has been with me 7 years and rental has been accruing at the rate of 8 or 10% or growing at the rate of 8 or 10% per annum. So, and this is a corporate tenant who I would like to keep. So those considerations come into place. And then if he says, look, the business environment has changed, please go back and let's renegotiate the rental. That happens every day. That happens in any event, regardless of COVID-19 or not. those conversations have to continue taking place, not just simply because of COVID, but COVID might be an impetus, to engage in them more and more. Yeah.
I mean,
So
thank
you are
you
perfectly correct.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, even outside COVID, because one thing I've observed, particularly in the Botswana market, and both residential and business, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, is we do have a tendency, particularly landlords, of inflating the price is a little bit high. I mean, Mr. Mogobe, for instance, if you have a 2-bedroom, let me give an example, a 2-bedroom apartment, decent, and you know that it doesn't have to go as far as a certain level of rental, or as high as a certain level of rent, but you just keep increasing by 10% every year, even if it doesn't make sense. And you stick to it, and you stick to that, and the tenant comes to you, says, I can't afford this, it's too much. You rather let go of the tenant than actually say to the tenant, okay, let's renegotiate. I mean, not the type of, maybe I don't know, maybe I'm not a business person, but I'm the type of landlord I am, is I measure and actually see, no, that will be unreasonable for me to even go beyond that level, and I say to the tenant, this is where we're keeping it for now, because at this level, this is how much a 2-bedroom apartment would be. Or in a mall situation, you say, this particular tenant, they possibly can't afford this place anymore, but they can't afford the rental that we're increasing at, but they bring in certain type of customers to our mall. Would you rather not retain that customer by maybe reducing the rental, come to a good agreement of what they can afford, what's reasonable for you to retain them, because they bring certain feet to your mall? This is an observation that I've made, that seems like landlords are just don't care about the customer. They don't engage the customer and say, okay, let's do this. I don't know, what is your observation and what is your advice for landlords on that?
Well, two things I have to say. One, you sound like a very astute and competent landlord. Really, you sound like you know your game.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think if you you're business minded, and if you are in it for the long haul, you will tend to be very, 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 very flexible, because it's an issue of emotional intelligence, isn't it? Because what you are saying is that what you are basically saying to yourself is that, look, let me not let my ego get in the way. If I harden my heart and lose this tenant, it might take at least 1 month or 2 months to look for another tenant. So I'm going to lose rental for that month or that, even if I keep this tenant at a reduced rent, because sometimes you reduce for as little as 10% and the tenant is happy.
Exactly.
Your place is going to remain occupied for the entire 12 months period in a year, and you don't suffer that huge loss, because if you compare in percentage terms the loss of rental of 1 or 2 months while you are looking for a good replacement tenant, compared to just reducing the rent you find that it makes no economic sense to harden your heart and to take a very hard posture. So in our business, it's not unheard of for us to get into these negotiations, especially at the end of the lease, especially during the negotiation period, and say, look, you've been a good tenant, what can we do? Let's adjust. And then normally 9 times out of 10, we enter into a win-win, because I'm one of those landlords who strongly believe in win-win situations with our tenants. We have currently about 260 tenants. So with those sort of numbers, we cannot afford to get into little fights with our tenants. So I do have my managers. I do have my individual managers, both in Maung and here in Gaborone, and they've been trained to be flexible, to be what's the right word? To show empathy, to be empathetic, and to be reasonable in the manner that you've suggested. So it's almost like you're describing our setup, if that's how you're thinking. Yeah. So I agree with you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mogobe. Thank you for that, because it's actually something that I wish we could shift to in terms of the way that we engage tenants and be more customer central.
I think successful. I just happen to think that the market normally sorts that out on its own. I think successful landlords, the ones that are growing, the ones that have significant portfolios, have to adopt that kind of thinking, emotional intelligence, that sort of awareness, that sort of reasonableness in any field. So you might have a difficult landlord, maybe who has maybe 5 units and is not maybe their only property. So sometimes they don't have a bigger picture. So I'm a very, very strong believer in the bigger picture kind of thinking, big picture thinking, where you have a sort of a panoramic view of business. You have an overriding view of business, and you have a sense of awareness of, you're thinking long term. You're not thinking 2-3 years. You're thinking 5, 10, 15, even 20 or 30 years along, because you're building a reputation along the way. I'm pleased to say a lot of our tenants hardly ever vacate. We have tenants who've been with us 12 years, 15 years, because of this sort of relationship that we're continually trying to build.
No, absolutely, Mr. Mogobe. I mean, I think that's just the best way to approach it. I mean, I have an experience, by the way. I used to be one of your tenants, by the way. It's a surprise, but I had at the Mogobe, the one at the mall, the main mall,
the office park.
The office park.
I hope we were nice to you.
Yes, you were. What's his name? Your property manager, Hape. He's amazing, by the way.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he's amazing. So he did give us very good. Just that
I'll let him know. I'll let him know what you think of him.
Yes, no, he's really good. I'm just a very fussy tenant, a fussy customer. So he handled me well. So.
Are you telling me we're not able to keep you? You're no longer with us?
Yes, no, I'm no longer with you. No, I just got a better offer somewhere else. It was another offer, not that I wasn't
a bigger
happy.
Place.
Yes, a bigger and the better collaboration somewhere else. So it's not that I wasn't unhappy or anything. It was just a good, a better offer.
That's good to know. I didn't even know you. I didn't even know we had that relationship. That's great. That's wonderful.
We do. Yes, no, we do. So I do have a good experience with your property. So I know that you are very customer centric. So
thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mogobe. I think, you've covered most of the questions with actually this interview. But what I would like you to just, and just conclude, what would you advise? Because I know right now there's a lot of anxiety between tenants and landlords. There's a lot of misunderstandings. People are not clear on how they should be communicating with their tenants. Should they be pushing their tenants to the corner? And tenants are feeling anxious. I know even landlords are feeling a little bit anxious as well. What would you advise how to handle?
I think the first point I would say is no panic. If you look at things historically, even in terms of this COVID-19, we've had so many calamities. We've had so many disasters over the years. If you think of the swine flu, if you think of H1N1, and if you go back to the time of bubonic plague or even the Spanish flu, how many people have died? It's already in Setswana, we've had those things happening in the past. So one thing is like keep some perspective in terms of numbers. Botswana has only 22 cases or 23, I'm not sure, only out of which there's only one fatality. So if you look at things in the bigger picture, we are not in the middle of a complete disaster. So I would urge the landlords and the tenants not to panic. The first step in the middle of a crisis is not to panic. Thankfully for me, I'm a person of faith, so I'll tend to my faith, and there's a lot of power to be derived from that faith in terms of keeping us anchored,
100.
keeping us anchored, keeping us centered, and keeping us just realize that this is a time to have courage and to have a courage of the convictions and keep moving forward, believing that the good Lord will rescue us from this situation as well.
100.
I have there's a famous saying which says, "This too shall pass." So if our prayers are answered, and our prayers are that this thing is just 1 or 6 weeks, it's 1 month or 6 weeks tops, we get out of it, and then we adjust over 6 months, we recalibrate and get back to the new normal. It will never be exactly the same normal that we used to have. There's so many lessons that we're going to have to learn from this COVID situation. There's so many changes that we need to make in the way that we do business, in terms of improvement, in terms of recalibrating, in terms of re-energizing our businesses, and really pivoting. And I like the expression, we need to pivot and have a paradigm shift as business people, as entrepreneurs. So think of this as an opportunity to do that. But going back to the landlord-tenant relationship, don't panic. Sit down and negotiate. There is always a way. There's always a way. I mean, you have to be looking back 10 years from now and thinking, I handled the COVID situation well. Because if you look at it, Lorato, these recessions and these terrible situations seem to happen in cycles of 7 to 10 years. If you think about it, we had the bubble. What do you call it? The tech bubble. In 2000. And then we had 2001. 9/11. Those were terrible situations that shook the earth. And then we had 809. We had situations that sort of shook the earth. So similarly, COVID is something that turns our lives upside down. But sooner or later, things get back to normal. And if you remain calm, you don't run to the hills, you don't dispose of your property, you don't do something stupid. This is not the time to do something drastic. Just calm down. There is a way, and I believe some good will come out of this COVID-19 situation. That's what I believe.
This too shall pass as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, I mean, we were having this conversation with Matludi the other day about the opportunity in this, that I think we were actually thinking, it's actually a huge opportunity for Botswana to start being self-sustainable, and not be too dependent on our neighbor South Africa. Let's be self-sustainable. Let's be creative.
It's a wake-up call.
It's a wake-up call that we need to learn how to be, do things for ourselves, and let's be creative and see ways of sustaining ourselves and our economy. So it's a huge opportunity in place. That's why it's important to also maintain the good relations with tenant and landlord. Let's have good communication lines. Let's have our spirit back, our spirit of Boto back that we've always had, basically.
Spirit of self-reliance, which Sister Radzakama spoke about. The real Ipelegi, not this one.
No, not that one, the proper one.
The proper Ipelegi, and the one that Siradza talked about originally. This is the time for it to kick in. And then this is the time for us to as you just stated, to realize that we are our own saviors. We have to save ourselves. Yes, foreigners can come in, the West can come in, the Chinese can come in, but they should not take the lead. What we've been doing is we call foreign investors to come and take the lead now. No. We are the ones who should take the lead. Those people should grow what we are already doing. We should be talking in terms of manufacturing, in terms of agriculture. Food security is very important. And those are the areas that I've been looking at and say, look, this is a wake-up call. Wake up. Stop saying, I'm going to look around for foreign investor to do this, to do that, to do that. You have it within yourself. Your government should support you as an entrepreneur. And if there's going to be a foreign investor, he has to come and assist you with what you're already doing. Not to start everything from scratch.
To collaborate, if anything,
Well,
and force the collaboration. Also the government, if they are bringing in the investors, force the collaboration with the locals so that it really empowers our locals. Well,
you need a strong citizen empowerment legislation to achieve that. You need, and I think the government has been making the right noises that come June, come July, the legislation is being worked on where we'll unashamedly promote our citizen entrepreneurs and be open about it. I have no shame about it. We are not kicking out everybody, but we are saying if you come, you add on to what we're already doing.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you add on to what we're doing. You're not here to dominate. We dominate in our economy.
Yeah.
Then you augment. Your job is
Yeah.
to augment what we're already in charge of.
Absolutely.
That's how I look at it. But
Absolutely.
I think COVID, those are some of the lessons that are coming out of COVID.
That we can't be dependent on anyone anymore. And it really takes us as Botswana to wake up. Like you're saying, we need to wake up, you know. Yeah.
Are you still there?
Yes, yes. I lost you there for a minute as well. I think the speed is slowing down. We need to ragarele erra.
Thank you so much for finding me worthy of an invitation such as this.
Erra, thank you. Actually, really appreciate this interview. I've really tapped into your brain and your wisdom. Thank you so much, Mr. Mogobe. You are appreciated.
Can I plug my my YouTube channel?
Yes, you can.
Mogobe Nuggets of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. I'm also accessible on Facebook. I'm also accessible on LinkedIn, where you say you saw me. So I'd be happy if your listeners could also subscribe to our channel on YouTube.
Yes. I'm actually also going to subscribe because I enjoy the conversations. You've got so much wisdom, Mr. Mogobe, by the way.
Thank you so much.
You're
very kind.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mogobe.
Okay, bye.
All right. Bye.
Emma, you say you. All right.